So when you think of Japanese whiskey, what's the first whiskey that comes to mind? So for most people, it's the Yamazaki 12 year, the single malt. It's truly an iconic whiskey. I'm Joe Jimenez, this is Citizen of the World. Let's get into it. So why is the Yamazaki so iconic? Well, for most folks, it was once they won the best world single malt back in 2012. It really put them on the map. Now, it really wasn't this one, the Yamazaki 12. It was the Yamazaki finished in a sherry cask. This is actually a blend of Yamazaki finished in ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, as well as Mizunara. I believe it's 80, 10, and 10 each, 80 being the bourbon, the other two being 10% each in the blend. And this is an example of the masterful blending technique that the Japanese do. That's one of the things that put this whiskey on everyone's radar. But if you think about Japanese whiskey and the iconic nature of the Yamazaki, it's because the Yamazaki was actually the first distillery in Japan constructed in the 1920s for whiskey making in Japan. And those of you who know a bit about Japanese whiskey probably already know the story about Masataka Taketsuru and Shinjiro Torii, who then became famous for Suntory, and Suntory is the brand that actually puts out the Yamazaki today. I mean, for me, one of the fun parts of that story is that their initial whiskey that they launched, which Masataka Taketsuru, and we'll cover this story sometime later in another video, we'll focus more on him. He had brought these whiskey making techniques from having studied in Scotland for a number of years. And the first whiskey they released was actually considered a failure in the Japanese market because it was, let's say, too close to the Scottish style and perhaps a bit heavy, aggressive for the Japanese palate at the time. Obviously, over the years, they perfected that, and hence the Yamazaki winning Best World Single Malt in those awards. The Suntory brand also has a moment in pop culture in Lost in Translation, in which Bill Murray's character is hired to do a promotional ad for the whiskey, and he has this iconic Suntory time line. For me, the whiskey is actually the first one that I came to try in Japan. As I mentioned to you before, as I was doing my whiskey journey, when I got to Kyoto and I was going to try Japanese whiskey, I took a walk over to Pontacho and I found this bar called Liquor Museum, and the bartender Yuki gave me a flight of Japanese whiskeys, and I started with the house Suntory, and I got to try the Yamazaki 12, the Yamazaki 18. And at the time, the 18 I thought was a little too strong for me. What I find now is that the 18 I think is an absolutely beautiful whiskey. This whiskey has, let's say, the classic notes that you would find in a whiskey that has been aged in those casks that I described. So you get your caramel, your honey, your vanilla. There's a huge nose of tropical fruit. Some describe it as a hint of coconut. For me, what I get is something like an apricot, or let's say an over-ripened grapefruit, if you can imagine such a thing. So given that natural, let's say, bitterness of a grapefruit, as it starts to become very ripe, it'll become sweet. It'll have this almost very complex fermented flavor. That's really what this smells like to me, with perhaps a hint of sandalwood from the Mizunara. I don't get the coconut on it, and I think it's probably a little too young to get that full expression of pineapple, but maybe that over-ripened grapefruit is probably as close as you get to it. It's a beautiful whiskey that covers the entire palate. It's very soft, and I think it expresses itself best probably on the mid palate to the finish. And the finish is relatively medium. It's a very soft, approachable whiskey at 43% ABV, so that's 86 proof. Beautiful, beautiful whiskey, and worth your time if you haven't had a chance to try it. There's even a hint of smoke on this. So as it comes across the tongue to the back, a little bit of spiciness in the back, perhaps some peppery, but there's a little hint of smoke or perhaps maybe ash. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful balanced whiskey. And this is why these whiskeys have become famous, because they are beautifully balanced. This is what the Japanese aesthetic in making whiskey is. It's clearly a Japanese single malt. This has nothing to do any longer with Scottish style or whatnot. It has this truly unique Japanese character. Actually, one of the interesting things that I learned today is that Mr. Iwai, IWAI, is the one who funded Masataka Taketsuru's trip to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey. And when Taketsuru-san comes back, the business had actually gone into receivership. So therefore he was available to then be hired by Torii-san. So it's kind of interesting how that evolved. And now today, the Iwai whiskeys, I don't know if you've had a chance to try them, but they are delicious. So by the way, have you ever tried the Yamazaki? Have you ever tried any of the Japanese whiskeys? And given that I have a fairly decent collection, mostly of the NIkka brand, which is where Masataka Taketsuru comes in, right? After he leaves Suntory, he goes up to Yoichi and he forms his own distillery, the Dai Nippon Kaju Company, NIkka, and create some of these other whiskeys, which probably the first award was actually given to the, I believe it was the Yoichi single cask in 2001. But the Yamazaki is obviously what everyone thinks of. Here's another fun fact that some of you might not have noticed, or you might have caught this on my B-roll. No cork, right? It's a screw cap. So when you think about the price of these whiskeys, and bear in mind, a couple of years ago, this was a $70 bottle. Now finding one that's age stated is really difficult to do. And they're, in my area in South Florida, they're north of $200 a bottle, if you can find it. And it's not a counterfeit one, but it's a screw top. So you see some folks get bent out of shape when their whiskeys have a synthetic cork. Look at this. This is the beautiful, iconic Japanese whiskey, the Yamazaki 12 with a screw cap. Just goes to show you that really depends on what people are accustomed to. I'm Joe Jimenez. This is Citizen of the World. Get out and try something new. Try the Yamazaki 12 or one of these other Japanese whiskeys. And if there's any other one that you would like me to try and get my hands on, please let me know. I will try to find myself a Yamazaki 18. Leave me a comment down below, and if you haven't, please forward this video to any of your friends who you think like Japanese whiskeys or this type of content. Kanpai.